So there's the Madame to the Stars that is like the femme fatale and crime boss, but there's also another character in a good crime story that shouldn't be cast aside, and that character is the tough as nails, takes no S word from anybody, crime beat reporter. And in Los Angeles crime history, that character is played by one Aggie Underwood of the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, the first female city editor of a major newspaper. Big deal.
Wow.
So Aggie was born Agness May Wilson in 1902, originally in San Francisco, but her family moved to Bellevue, Illinois.
Moved into the Bellevue, Illinois.
Illinois, that is. She spent some years in Bellevue. That's where she grew up.
Formative years.
Formative years.
Childhood.
In Bellevue. Her youthful years were pretty tragic. After her mom died when Aggie was 6, her and her younger sister were basically orphaned and spent much of their childhood bouncing from home to home with their father, who was a journeyman glassblower, tried to support them. He blew glass everywhere.
He blows glass, doesn't he?
And he was a journeyman, so they obviously needed it everywhere, so he was traveling probably by foot. I would imagine.
He couldn't blow his own car?
They were first taken after her mom died. Her dad's working a lot and always out of town, so they were first taken to an uncle's house in Indiana. They were then taken to another home in Indiana, but not long after that, that family dumped them into an orphanage.
Oh, God.
The sisters were separated at that point, which is a terrible thought to me. The younger one went to Portland, Indiana, and Iggy. I'm going to call her Iggy a lot by accident. Get ready for it. Aggie Pop. Aggie went to 3 different homes in a short period of time and then was getting used to families getting used to her and then sending her back to public charity.
God.
She called
public charity.
Public charity was the word that came
Wow.
up in her autobiography, which is great, by the way. She called herself incorrigible. Their dad came back and got both his daughters and then again dumped them on a relative's doorstep. That was a good home to her, though, even though she was once again separated from her sister. In this house, she learned a lot of life lessons and she was treated with respect by people that she respected. This is where she grew up and got a lot of her formative years. Her first movie she saw when she was 13 was something called Birth of a Nation. Which we talked about, serious? I think last episode.
Yeah.
So
she loved it.
She saw it at the White House with Woodrow Wilson.
Bring the kids, unless they're 9 or 11.
At 15, she dropped out of high school and started working as a clerk in a basement of Cartwright's department store, making $5 an hour. Soon after her father died, she moved to San Francisco, 1918, to be with another relative. Only when she arrived, she found that that relative had moved out, and now she had nowhere to go in a strange new metropolis with only $1.50 to her name.
How old was she?
I want to say she was like 15. I didn't bring the book with me. She has a description. Maybe I'll record it and send it to you later.
She is 4.
Okay, so basically she walked around San Francisco for 10 hours crying quietly to herself.
Oh my God. Hey, we've all been there.
Carrying a wicker basket and squandering 10 cents of her dollar on taffy that she chewed all day to savor it.
Is this my autobiography?
She fell asleep / cried all night into the next day on a bench in Union Square. When she came to from a delirious panic, she had told her entire story to a woman who was seated next to her on that bench. And that woman was a bookkeeper named Dolly Peterson, an angel from heaven, that took Aggie to a Methodist boarding house called the Mary Elizabeth Inn. And there...
A meth house?
You said meth house? What'd you say, meth house? Mary Elizabeth Inn, this Methodist boarding house. Aggie got a warm meal, a warm bath, and a warm bed, all because she had a letter from a Methodist clergyman from Portland in her wicker basket. She's like Felix with the bag of tricks. And she was able to, because of that letter, get permanent lodging at this place. She soon got a job as a messenger at the White House department store. White House.
Wait, what?
There's a department store called the White House. She got a job
She was
there.
an aide at the White House department store.
The White House department store. More good fortune came her way when she was able to use 3 months of another woman's tuition for business college and got handy at typing.
Wait, how did she get another woman's tuition?
There was a woman who only did 3 months of a year's program and left. And
so
then
she took her identity?
She took her identity. What's funny was that 2 years ago, if I made even the smallest Mad Men reference, like, shut up! But now you're out here making Dick Wickley references, and I'm not supposed to make a big deal of it.
Well, only the true fan I know his true name is Du Whitman.
Du Whitman. I know that his name is Lamont Cranston, the Shadow.
Don Draper knows.
Don Draper knows. Just don't ask him because it's really sad, whatever he says.
And he won't tell you. He might just throw a drink in your face.
So that was good fortune, was getting this business school. Bad fortune came her way when a relative sent Aggie a message saying that she for sure 100% positively had a place for her to crash in Los Angeles. And after 3 months in sunny California, she was out on her bottom again. But at least this time she had a job when she was on her bottom. She was working in a department store on Broadway and moved into the Salvation Army for Ladies on 5th and Grand, where the Biltmore Hotel now stands. It's here where she meets Evelyn Connors, another hardworking orphan girl. The two were fast friends and soon switched gigs to become telephone operators. She also worked...
How can you just switch identities so easily?
Not to boast too much about jokes I've made on stage, but getting jobs in old times was like, hey, that seat's empty, can I take it? You want to give me some money? They're like, yeah, sure. Did you circle the ad in the paper? That's a line that you wrote for the joke.
Did I?
Yeah, you did.
Really?
It's the best line in the joke, and I didn't write it.
Huh.
It's okay.
I'm glad that's on tape. We're still recording on tape, right?
This is the last podcast we do together. Aggie also had a job at the Pig and Whistle in Hollywood. There she made a friend.
Really?
Yeah, she did.
Did she ever go to the Egyptian?
Did she ever go to Amoeba?
Did she eat at Hooters too?
She got the discount at Hooters from Carolyn too. She made a friend who was a soda jerk there, who was also an adopted son. Or she wasn't adopted, but you know what I mean. Also a child. Bad, sad stuff.
Child of sadness.
One day, her Hollywood relative who had kicked her on her bottom came back and insisted for some reason that she move back in with her, telling sweet Aggie that if she didn't move in with that relative again, that she would report her to the juvenile authorities since she was too young to be living on her own. She told her worries to her...
She was under 18.
I think she was like 16 at the time. She told all her worries to her soda jerk friend who was who had a curious suggestion. He was like, well...
Tell it to Willie.
He had a curious suggestion for her not having to move back in. He's like, well, you can do whatever you want if we were married. Let's get married. So they got married. So
Classic.
in April of 1920... Classic move to keep a girl from having to do something she doesn't want to. Here's another thing you don't want to.
From keeping your girlfriend from having to move back into the orphanage. Marry her.
Marry her. Live in my orphanage, which is the relationship that I won't father because I don't know how to love anything. That's not me. That's the soda jerk talking. I know how to love things. I'm capable of it. We all see it.
I'll do it right now. Look, I'm loving.
Not this podcast.
Hey.
So in April of 1920, Aggie married the
Not
soda
my
jerk.
podcast.
In April of 1920, Aggie married the soda jerk and took his surname Underwood. A few years later, the two moved to Ocean Park and opened their own soda fountain where Aggie was the waitress. And in August of that year, she became pregnant with their first child. At that point, as being young and getting pregnant goes, the Underwoods moved back to the LA area and she took a job as a cashier in a silk store on Broadway near 4th, where she was able to get Evelyn a job. And then she became pregnant again with a second child, and her sister, her long-lost sister, moved in with her in Los Angeles. And Aggie spent a great deal of energy at this point, becoming a loving mother and a wife, a hardworking stay-at-home mom at this point. Agness was an orphan who was now surrounded by family in her terms. This is an accomplishment itself worthy of an episode segment, but it doesn't end there. Even though her sister was now contributing to the household, the family always seemed to be struggling with money, which is an unrelatable problem due to my extraordinary wealth.
You can struggle with it.
Was there too much of it? They didn't know where to put it?
I knew you could spend it. You could invest it.
Yeah.
You could struggle with it.
I guess sometimes I spend too much at dog fights, but...
That's how I made my first 3 millions. At dog fights. Stay tuned for pets next month.
We're going to make all the pets fight each other. There's no history, just fighting.
Flipper versus Toto.
Rin Tin Tin, surprisingly, comes from the other corner. Her sister was living her. They have another person in the household, but because of the kids and probably living in a house that requires money, they're still strapped for cash. She made a habit at this point of wearing her sister's discarded silk stockings, and no one wants that life.
Ew.
Aggie asked her husband for the money to buy her own pair of silk stockings, and he declined their request. They fought, and she was like, well, fine. I'll go out and get a job and buy my own stockings, see you in the funny pages. And she really didn't want to go back to work. She liked being a stay-at-home mother to her kids. But the very next day, her old pal, Evelyn Connors, by the way, Aggie named her daughter after Evelyn, she asked Aggie if she was interested in a couple of weeks of temporary work doing vacation relief as a switchboard operator at the Los Angeles Record, 1612 Wall Street in downtown. She accepted. I'm not sure which was a better reason, spite or silk, but the Los Angeles Record was one of the 6 major metro newspapers in LA in 1926. There was the Record, there was the Times, there was the Evening Herald, the Examiner, the Evening Express, and the Illustrated Daily News. The Record was the smallest of the 6. At the Record, Aggie was soon enough taken under the wing of the Record's women's section editor, Cynthia Gray, whose real name was Gertrude Price. I don't know why there's a distinction. I didn't figure that out.
It's more manly.
I got nothing.
I can't relate to that.
I can't relate to
anything manly.
Aggie became her catch-all assistant, Cynthia Grade / Gertrude Price. She was now making decent money and had her children watched by a neighbor who lived on Echo Park Avenue, shout out, which means that Aggie probably lived on the avenue at some point, another shout out. Cynthia Gray or Gertrude Price was a great reporter who would go on to work for the Los Angeles Daily News, which eventually absorbed the Record, which, anyway, she was Aggie's mentor.
It has been absorbed.
Aggie was 24 years at this point, old. What did I say?
She was 24 points.
She was 24 points shy of being 24 years. Okay, so it's 1927. The city was wrapped up in a tragic and sensational story. William Hickman, the Fox, was on the run for kidnapping and murdering the poor little Marion Parker, who we talked about on Take a Walk.
Yeah.
Aggie was in the...
What is this, 1927?
Yeah, 27.
Okay.
Aggie was in a newsroom of the Record when he was caught in Oregon. It was an electric hum of the newsroom that activated something in Aggie Underwood. When he was captured...
She might be a replicant. Go on.
She didn't know what she's feeling. When he was captured, Aggie telephoned her husband to tell him about it, and she was reprimanded by her boss, Gertrude Price. She said...
Reprimanded.
Sorry, that's just the sound I make when I'm upset. She said, what would happen if the Record had a story exclusively? If you had telephoned your husband and if you told someone who mentioned it to the opposition, we could be scooped on our own story. This taught Aggie an important lesson: never talk outside about a story until it was in print, circulating on the streets. The city editor, Rod Brink, noticed Aggie was interested and said, if you're interested, take this dictation. And that bug bit her. And now she's Spider-Man.
She's J. Jonah Jameson. I got bit
I need pictures!
I got bit by a radioactive newspaper.
Her boss, Gertrude Price, liked the idea and supported Aggie Aggie becoming a reporter. She started practicing typing by copying local stories, rewriting them, and then trying out find out different angles on a new lead on a story. She then learned how to write the lead, that banging first paragraph that will hook a reader in. Aggie rose to the ranks, first as the women's section reporter, then to the general assignment reporter. She started covering things like wrestling matches, when then moved on to auto races. She interviewed the man who had planted the first cotton in California. She was known for an unconventional...
She scooped us,
damn it. She was known for an unconventional method of reporting. This is an example they gave when I read about it. There are better examples of her unconventional stuff, which is not unconventional now, but it was back then. But this is a story.
Times New Roman.
Comic Sans. She covered the 1933 Long Beach earthquake and brought her son and her husband along because there had just been an earthquake, so they didn't want to be separated from each other. And after a series of aftershocks set off while they were walking that alley, a 2-story brick wall collapsed while she was reporting. And she said, I read an article, her reporter instinct saved her family from being crushed. In her book, she just said, I said look out for no reason, and they ran, and we didn't get crushed. That's the way she thinks of it. What? More importantly than saving her family was her angles on stories. I keep writing angels.
She's a Methodist.
We're getting back to Charles Crawford, the Grey Wolf, who we talked about, who was part of the crime syndicate, the City Hall gang. Him and a guy named Herbert Spencer were gunned down. Listen again to the episode on alcohol. That story was developing. There's a lot of stories covering the shooting and the surrender of the shooter named David Clark. Aggie saw that no one tried to interview Clark's parents, so she tracked them down in the phone book. They lived in Highland Park. She got an exclusive interview with them with photographs. She got a 2-column picture and story on the front page with the headline, Mrs. Clark says son is innocent. They say
That's not catchy. Mrs. Clark, you've got a lovely son.
Mrs. Clark, you're trying to seduce me into innocence.
You're trying to equip me.
They say her instincts were unconventional, but it seems like her life as both an orphan and now as a family woman had given her the perspective to think about Clark's family. I can't tell what kind of person Aggie Underwood is from her autobiography because she's very cocky sometimes, and also she says stuff like this about her first front page article. Whatever elation I felt over the Cityside byline and the exclusive was dampened by the realization that I was a little green frog trying to get a chance to swim among great big frogs in a great big pond whose depth I hadn't even tested. Rough translation, I got a front page exclusive, so what? That just puts me in the running with regular reporter. Like, I'm not a big deal.
And she invented Frogger.
She just hopped over everybody.
I'm just a little frog trying to cross a freeway, which don't exist yet.
But then Rod Brink, the editor, offered Aggie an interview with Herbert Spencer's widow, which she took. And then she kept reporting and getting better opportunities and meeting more experienced reporters and learning from them and then getting better opportunities. She just kept growing her skills.
Yeah, that's impressive work ethic.
I think it is. Yeah. The work ethic, which I'm keep reading, and it's of course inspiring and something I've heard all along, is just keep showing up. Just learn stuff and keep showing up and keep showing up and don't go away and just keep showing up.
Wish we could learn that.
I want to quit so bad everything. She became legendary for her hard-boiled quips and jabs. Whilst viewing the stiff, sheet-covered body of movie actress Thelma Todd after her mysterious death, which has not been solved to this day, it is rumored that Aggie said of the men who surrounded her, can you imagine what any of these guys would have given to be under the sheet with Thelma Todd? By the way, her first autopsy she had ever attended. The guys around the office were like, well, we got to break her in. And it was kind of like a testing thing of like, you want to go to an autopsy and see a dead body? And she knew it was a test, and she was one of the only staff members who didn't get sick when she saw Thelma Todd's dead body. It was reportedly her and just the guys from the coroner's office who had stayed for the show of the autopsy, the show. All the other staff members had, as Joan Renner said, tossed cookies.
Still not a phrase I'm familiar with.
You should be. You eat a lot of cookies and you vomit in public a lot. You should be familiar with the phrase tossing cookies.
Cookies don't make me vomit. Cookies would never do that. Cookies don't kill people. You do.
I've seen it. That same year, 1935, there was a shakeup. Not an earthquake, a shakeup.
Look out.
She was offered a job as a reporter for the Herald Express, which was the big leagues. The Los Angeles Examiner was founded in 1903 as a morning daily newspaper, and at the helm was old Citizen Kane himself, William Randolph Hearst, Billy Randy. If you ever wonder how big of a deal he was, you should go visit his castle. It was the later years, the 50s-ish. I love it, too. That pool, gimme.
I want the movie room.
I almost said, well, he's going to fill pea jars, but that's a different person. That's a different millionaire.
That's a different guy with a nice pool.
Don't go in the pool because it's just urine and fingernails.
His pool is one giant jar.
Good mustache, though. The Examiner...
That's no mustache.
It's 4P. In the later years, the 50s-ish, the Examiner became the largest afternoon daily in the nation. The Examiner was known for eye-grabbing headlines, muck-raking expose. I put racking here. Muck-raking exposés, sensational stories, color comics.
She better not flash her tar at you.
They had color comics. Crazy Cat was published in the Examiner. You know Crazy Cat. It's
say the one that
George Harriman. So he throws a brick.
What?
No, he throws a brick at the cat.
George Harrison throws a brick at a cat.
George Harriman, the cartoonist.
Oh, George Harriman.
Yeah, has a comic strip.
Okay.
Where a mouse throws a brick at a cat, and the cat loves the mouse, and I think the police officer loves the cat. It's weird.
I was thinking this was a scene from I Got My Mind Set on You music video. I thought you said George Harrison. It would make sense that he throws a brick at a cat in that music video.
Yeah, no, I see it. He's got his eyes set on him. That's why.
My mind.
They're also known for patriotic editorials that bordered nationalism. Hearst also ran the Evening Herald and the Express, which obviously was a supper time read. And just to mention, in the 1960s, Hearst merged the two papers to become the Los Angeles Herald Examiner. Anyways, the Evening Herald has its roots back in 1873 and focused on local issues of Los Angeles and Southern California. The Herald started with a focus on agriculture, then moved to reporting primarily on Hollywood gossip and local scandal, reflecting the new 20th century Los Angeles, where everyone has a skateboard and every starlet is a target.
And every target is a JCPenney.
Most importantly, it was a paper for the working class, every person. The Los Angeles Herald Express was on Georgia Street in downtown LA between 12th and Pico. In case you need to know that, it is now where the Staples Center and the 110 is. In the 20s, the decade that watched Los Angeles go from being a where's that city to it's over there city. It obviously becomes a metropolis. We said many times. The population, similar to the LA Times building, explodes. Two of the more well-known editors of the Herald at the time were two men. Gross. Why, man? Wes Barr and James H. Richardson. These two were especially known for their investigative reporting. As I read, they became prototypes for the morally ambiguous chain-smoking reporters you'd see in noir movies. In 1922, the Herald officially joined the Hearst news empire, and in 1931, Hearst merged the Los Angeles Daily Herald with the Los Angeles Evening Express to form the Los Angeles Evening Herald and Express.
This is too much.
Which was then the largest circulating evening newspaper west of the Mississippi. I can't track all of that.
And it was also a train. The Herald Express.
Oh, he's Huntington. George Huntington, who's a creative...
Are you talking about George Harrison again?
Yeah, no, I'm talking...
You mean Henry Huntington, the guy from I Got My Mind Set on You music video?
The Herald Express is the one that she jumped aboard. She was offered a job. What should be mentioned is that her accomplishments as a reporter had her noticed by Hearst. So what does Aggie do when she's offered a job as a big league reporter for William Randolph Hearst Herald Express at $2.50 more an hour than she was making? She turned it down. Two reasons. One was that at the short-staffed LA Record, she was getting more experience because, as we all know, in a smaller company, you just do more. You build more skills because there isn't enough people to do all this stuff.
Yeah, I know. I've seen Mad Men. Dick Whitley. Do Whitman.
Do Whitman. Also, she didn't have a car. Also, loser. Take the trolley, loser.
Steal your husband's badge and take the trolley.
I'm a reporter, I swear. Yeah, you a husband's reporter?
You report on what's for dinner. What is for dinner?
I'm really hungry, miss, please. The Herald Express staff was also cutthroat about their competitive reporting, and that made Aggie apprehensive about wanting to join the ranks. She still thought of herself as a little frog. Like, I can't make it. But it didn't matter, because in 1935, the Los Angeles Record was sold to the Illustrated Daily News, and some of her and her staff were the last ones to know about it. So she had to big league up. First, with the latest was the slogan of the Herald Express, which was just show you what her new schedule of deadlines was going to be like. It should be said that her first piece for the Herald was an interview with some female pilot, Emily Earhart?
No.
That was her first interview.
No.
Hired as a general assignment reporter, little froggy Aggie Underwood paired up with photographer Perry Fowler, who was just as tough as she was. Together, the two covered fires and floods and accidents and weddings of the stars and morale cases of the stars and general mayhem. But Underwood and Fowler seemed to gravitate towards crime. Aggie said this: making our rounds like early morning milkmen, we hit up what was called a milk run, clearing up coverage of big and little crimes ranging from rapes and more rapes to robberies, burglaries, wife beatings, missing girls, major traffic accidents, drunk rollings, filmed them brawls, and the complications that blot police report records.
Which are the minor crimes in that one?
I'm gonna say traffic accidents. I'm gonna say major traffic accidents are the
and
little
movie
things.
Fights. Or
movie
whatever.
fights, yeah, depends on the fight. It's a popular anecdote that in 1939 Aggie helped solve a crime.
The fight between Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood.
Some fight. Still can't figure out who won that. Helped solve a crime. She showed up to a scene of an accident on Angeles Crest Highway and met with Laurel Crawford, who said he had managed to flee his family's out-of-control car before it plunged 1,000 feet down an embankment. Unable to flee were his wife, his 3 kids, and a boarder in their home. Aggie noticed that his clothes and his demeanor were both a little too neat. When the sheriff asked her what she thought, she said these words: guilty as hell. Sure enough, the family had a $30,000 life insurance price on their heads that Daddy wanted. Daddy wanted
Double
that
indemnity.
money. Yeah, well, not really, but yeah.
Daddy indemnity.
This is something I read from the LA Times. Aggie prided herself on giving murder cases catching names. In a moment of inspiration and calculation, the LA Times words, not mine, she dropped a white carnation on the body of a waitress who had been stabbed to death just to give the story the name The White Carnation Murder, which is a famous LA murder. When she told...
very unethical.
Well, she didn't kill her.
Do what you want with her. She's dead.
She's just dead, which it sounds like from what I was reading, because the press was pretty much invited to a crime scene. It seemed like the cops were like, just do whatever you want. Jeez, I don't care. Clearly, I had not seen Nightcrawler. Neither have I, because it's dumb.
Nightcrawler 2049.
When she told her photographer to take a picture of her creation, a cop objected, and Underwood smacked him with her purse.
Which was filled with knives.
Which is filled with crime scene evidence. Aggie took the big leagues of the Herald Express very seriously, and that meant, I suppose, becoming desensitized and cynical. She was quoted as saying, "I never sobbed a story in my life. I'm a reporter. As for weeping, I was too busy to think about hydraulics. I wanted to think about the phone with the verdict and the quotes, and I did." She was not afraid of cursing out public officials or getting into fistfights with uncooperative interviewees.
Oh my God.
Once even telling off as surly Frank Sinatra. I love this story.
Is there any other kind?
I mean, like...
He did it his way. And now I'll do you my way.
She once, this is a really good story, had her son and his friends in town, so she took them to the studio to meet some actors, and my old enemy, Mickey Rooney, was spotted, and she asked for a photo, and he was really dismissive and kind of in a rush, and he was rude, as he always is, because he's a creep, so she dismissed him. It's like, oh, never mind. And he's like, oh, yeah, sure, and he's like red in the face, and she's like, yeah, I'm sure. But they got a photo with the beautiful Loretta Young, who thanked Aggie and the boys for wanting a photo with her.
Oh.
That's how it's done, Rooney, you goon.
Goonie.
Mickey Goonie. She had a reputation for knowing the middle names, private phone numbers, and carefully guarded secrets of everyone from police chiefs to gangsters to starlets.
I'd like to have her black book.
It's just curse words. She was a frequent of the Tehachapi Women's Prison, which was a new thing, often interviewing the dangerous women of Los Angeles and offering the females' perspective on these crime stories. Aggie was far from a feminist. Her first line of her autobiography, her Call Me Ishmael, is, "I am no feminist." That's how the book starts. But she certainly gave women a chance to speak in what seems like a time when that was not usual. It felt like if the woman's sentence was too harsh for the crime, she would report a more sensitive side of the criminal story to aid her to get released early or have time reduced. It was once reported that Aggie hid a wanted murderess in her home while her daughter's Girl Scout troop met in order to keep the criminal and her story away from other reporters.
Oh my God. Ethical as ever. Good mother.
Good mother. Here's a line from an article from the LA Times, and I'll read it verbatim because it's so delightful. Mobster Mickey Cohen, Boyle Heights' own, which I wrote that, not them, called her every time he landed in jail to give her an exclusive, and phoned when he was hungry for one of her spaghetti dinners.
Which he ate with his hands to make sure that there were no knives in it.
So, as I said, she worked as a general assignment reporter from 35 to 47. What happens in crime world Los Angeles in January of 1947, Daniel? Well,
Mel Gibson?
Yeah, that's it.
Mel Gibson was born?
He's a ghost every year on the highway.
You will be visited
PCH,
by 3 Mel Gibsons.
each with a different
Mad
sugar
Max.
bosoms remark.
Mad Max, the Road Warrior, and Whitney Houston.
Do you mean Tina Turner?
Yep.
Thank you. 1947, January. Well, the bisected bride of doom, Elizabeth Short, is found drained of blood and cut in half on 39th North. Actually, it's closer to Coliseum Street, but whatever. It is, to this day, the most notorious cold case in Los Angeles history. Aggie Underwood was called from, I think, a detective, and she was assigned to the case, and she, among with many other reporters, which was the problem in the case, claimed to have come up with the moniker the Black Dahlia.
Did she put a flower on it, on the body?
Where can I leave this? What half of the body can I leave this on?
Oh, God.
Because before that, it was referred to as the werewolf killings because there was a woman, cut in half. The Black Dahlia came later from the media.
Could have been Lon Chaney.
So according to Aggie, it's not a reference to the Blue Dahlia, which was the film, which I did not like. It was something that a bunch of locals at a drugstore in Long Beach would call Elizabeth Short. So they think it comes from that. And Aggie takes credit for coming up with the Black Dahlia, but so do a lot of other people, so we don't know. I believe her story.
I believe I came up with the Black Dahlia.
I definitely killed Elizabeth Short.
Oh, oops.
Oh, no, I didn't.
And Natalie Wood. Oops.
No, I did it again. She managed to interview Robert Red Manley, who was the first serious suspect in the Black Dahlia case. Her story on Manley was never concluded, however, because she was benched from the piece without warning, the biggest crime story of Los Angeles history at the time of many times, and Aggie Underwood couldn't work it. She was at that point given a promotion. Aggie Underwood became the city editor of Los Angeles Herald Express, the first woman in the country to take that position at a major metropolitan newspaper. Round of applause. She herself... Thanks.
I put 2 hands together, but no noise was made.
I heard... You want to do it again? Wow, okay. You're not good at this. This is why they don't want you to come into shows.
Hey, that's not why.
She herself never understood the timing of the promotion and straight up reads like a conspiracy, but the position was a big deal for her and a big deal for women working in journalism. But to Aggie, she wanted to work the Black Dahlia case. The Black Dahlia case is the one that got away. Later in life, her grandkids found out that
her Moby Dick.
That's her Moby Dick, yeah. Her grandkids found out that she was a big deal later in life, and they asked her like what the name of the killer was. All she said was, "He's dead and it doesn't matter anymore."
Wow.
Yeah.
She could have just been saying that in general terms.
Yeah. When I read it, I had the same wow, she knows. As city editor, she was the boss that everyone loves because they're good at their job, but is also scared of.
She killed him.
Her?
What if she killed the killer?
Imagine.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that movie. So she's the kind of boss that everyone loves because they're good at their job, but they're scared of because they probably yell a lot. I'm assuming that second part, but there's a lot of articles that say she was a super great boss. Aggie encouraged a jovial newsroom and would buy reporters beers when it got too hot in the newsroom. She got each reporter reporters a special Christmas tie, which is incredibly sweet. Apparently, when the newsroom got too quiet, she'd fire off blanks from a gun she kept in her desk drawer. There are plenty of photos with her with a giant baseball bat that had her name on it. This was used to keep off overzealous Hollywood press agents. Later, as a joke, they gave her a cartoonish...
Oh, that's not the joke?
It gets funnier. They gave her a cartoonishly large bat that read, "To Aggie, keep swinging." It wasn't all baseball bats and guns. Her reporting was making her well known and respected. She won scores of awards, ranging from the most...
Now that's a fun turn of phrase. Scores of awards.
Scores of awards.
Scores of awards.
She won scores of awards.
Either
She won stuff like Most Outstanding Woman in Journalism from the National Federation of Press Women to the Los Angeles Women's First Woman of the Year in Professional Journalism. She was named in the first edition of Who's Who of American Women in 1959. And Ralph Edwards featured her on his national TV show, This Is Your Life, which must have been sad for an orphan. Like, do you remember this family that kicked you out? Aggie Underwood, This Is Your Life.
Here's half of the Black Dahlia. This is your life.
This is your life. Oh, this is a nightmare. The audience is cats for some reason. I can't figure it out. I want to go home. My teeth keep falling out. The journalism world respected her, but not her management. She was bitter that not one Hearst executive ever said nice work over a story, but also she said this. No one said nice work, or even they never bought me ice cream cone on my birthday. So help me. That's sad. Yeah. I would have bought her all the ice cream cones. In the 60s, after the Herald Express merged with the LA Examiner and became the Herald Examiner, they abandoned their morning edition and left into the LA Times, which was disastrous since television was about to start giving the evening news away. Anyways, when the two Hearst papers merged, the Herald Express gang moved into the Examiner building on 11th Street and Broadway, and Underwood was moved upstairs as an assistant managing editor, which is not the same thing. She did that for about 4 years, which sounds really joyless and very un-Aggie-like. She wandered around, she said, like a half-assed executive, and after that feeling, after all she'd been through, that was enough. So in 1968, after 33 years of service and increasing circulation for the Hearst papers, she retired. They had a huge retirement party for her at the Hollywood Palladium, which was overflowing. They received telegrams from mayors and senators and governors and LBJ. Bob Hope,
whatever he is.
Bob Hope emceed this event.
Really?
Yeah. She seemed to be really happy, have a happy life as a retiree. She was keeping busy gardening and cooking and being a grandmother. But retirement didn't keep her quiet, because in 1980, a novel from Ovid Damaris was released called The Last Mafioso, and it claimed in this biography that Aggie helped Mickey Cohen steal $1 million.
Oh, God.
So Aggie filed a $110 million defamation suit claiming that she was falsely portrayed in this.
So in the end, he did help her make $1 million.
I guess so. A judge dismissed the suit, saying the statements were mere opinions. 3 years later, a state appeals court granted a rehearing, but the case was never resolved because sadly in 1984, at the age of 81, sassy and lovable Aggie Underwood passed away. She was an orphan girl crying...
1981, you say?
No, she was 81. In 1984, she died. She was an orphan girl crying... In the book.
1984.
In the book, 1984.
She died.
She was dead. In the book, 1984, from George Orwell. She died. She was an orphan girl crying on a park bench who became the first female city editor of a major newspaper after her husband didn't want to give her money to buy silk stockings, and I love her. I want to give another short segment to another really great woman of LA crime stuff.
My mom.
My mommy. I'd like to give a shout out to Aggie's successor and biographer, a lady that I am quite fond of, Joan Renner, who runs the Rage LA Crimes blog, which I have been smitten over for years.
Didn't we see her at the thing?
We did see her, yeah.
When we went to the Cecil Hotel.
Yeah, we saw her there. She was sitting a couple of seats away from us, and I kept wanting to say, like,
during a meeting over Bob Hope's estate.
Yeah, she was there. I kept wanting to say something.
And the Black Dahlia was sitting. And the city council were cats too.
Many entries ended up from her blog in the first with the latest, which Joan wrote about Aggie. Aggie is her hero. You may have seen her on some crime shows. She's made appearances on about 20 episodes of various ID Discovery Channel programs like Deadly Women, Evil Twins, Deadly Affairs, Evil Kid, Nightmare Next Door. I first encountered Miss Renner on the Raymond Chandler Esoteric Tour, and she mentioned that she was working with James Alroy on what turned out to be LAPD 53, and I followed her to Central Library, talking at her like any male does about her love of crime, and I talked at her. Any murderinos out there should look her up. Her blog is great. She also runs a blog where she collects vintage cosmetic ephemera. It's called Vintage Powder Room. According to her blog, she's now working at the LA County Sheriff's Deputy Museum. She was previously with the LA Police Museum. She's a fantastic writer and historian.
Started by Stebbin Wells.
So, yeah, Aggie. It's great.
Aggie. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I think it's pretty cool.